Okay, we are back with episode 9 of CX Collective in the Zone. Today we talk about quality assurance. I say this every time, like, oh, this is going to be a good one. You know, this one people ask us about all the time. But these are true things. It will be a good one. Yeah, we're going to dig in. My name is Ty Gibbons. I am founder and CEO of CX Collective. I have been in customer experience since I was 18, so barely 3 years. And now I work with this team of amazing people, and we get to talk about and nerd out on all things CX fairly often, and I enjoy it very, very much. So we're gonna dig in. We're gonna start, but first, let's introduce everybody. Let's go to Jordan first today.
Hey everyone, I'm Jordan. I'm a CX operations manager here at the Collective. I got my start in customer experience kind of with QA and building out a QA program. So very excited to talk about something that's special to me, and I think every company needs at some level.
I don't think I knew that. How did I not know that? Oh.
Yeah. I've been doing it. I started as a rep and then found my way into the quality assurance role 6 months in, and
started from the bottom. Now he's here. I like it. Okay, wonderful. Okay, Chloe, you go next.
All right. Hey, guys. I'm Chloe. I'm also the CX operations manager at the Collective. I've been doing customer service management for almost 10 years now. And I also got started in quality, started as an agent, went into quality, and then went into training from there. So this is also a really cool topic, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Splendid. Sasheen?
Hey everyone, I'm Sasheen. I am the CX strategist with the Collective. I've been in customer service for over 20 years. And as far as quality assurance, it's been kind of dabbled as I've gone along. I will say that. I found myself getting kind of snatched into the QA teams because of whatever work that I started to, put out. And then they would be like, okay, you need to come and talk to us about this, that, or the other. So I've worked in very much so in collaboration with QA. And then once I started working with smaller businesses, started to develop their QA protocols. And so I am excited to hear more from the team about all the wonderful things that are QA.
Woo! All right, so let's ask the burning question of what is quality assurance? Who wants to go first? We got 2 vets on the team, so this is I can't wait to I'm gonna sip my coffee.
Me too. I'm gonna let them just go ahead on and talk.
Mm-hmm. I think quality assurance is the standards that you have. Mm-hmm. So what are the basic things that should be consistent through your interactions with your customer? And also within your team as well. Are you following your processes, things like that?
Okay. Yeah, totally agreed. I think it's building a program that can help build and ensure that anytime a customer is talking to somebody in your team, they're getting that same consistent experience. They're getting the right answer, the right processes being followed, internally and externally, tags and all that correct. But just ensuring that consistent brand experience is a big part of it.
Yeah, I think it is. Sasheen, do you want to jump in before I say anything? I just started talking.
Depending on the industry, QA can make or break a situation because of expectations of work. I know in the housing authority, we had to be top notch on our QA because we were being kind of judged and rated. So there's that part too, where you want to make sure, especially if you're in an industry where they're looking at that for, revenue or any of those big things that drive company, that quality assurance is top notch.
Yeah, for sure. I know when we were deciding on topics to talk about, I was specifically, we're going to focus on customer experience quality assurance because QA is a universal term and it applies to many different industries in various ways. So I definitely agree with what you're saying there. The simplest way, what I say is that quality is a way for you to make sure that the experience you think you're giving is actually the experience that you're giving. Right? Because you can train someone until you're blue in the face. And while they're in front of you, they'll, dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and then you leave them off to their own devices. And then the next thing you know, you're like, you said what? Right? And then it's also a good opportunity to define what best judgment is, which varies very much for many different people. Best judgment is not always the best way to allow someone to decide what is the right next thing to do. And I think quality assurance kind of makes that happen. So, okay, Going back to, my olden days, given that, I'm barely 3 years into this at 21, 100 years ago, but more like 20 something years ago, when I worked for Office Depot, we used to use a tool called Click to Coach. I don't even know if it still exists. It was click the number 2 and then coach. And this was like cutting edge technology because it recorded your screen while you were on the call. And it actually for people who were monitoring, they could see what did you say? What did you do? And I thought it was amazing, but I think it was very, very expensive. I don't know of any other, I've never come across it again. Not in that way. So let's say that we are, which we often do, working with businesses who are launching their customer experience program. And they're at the point now where they're about to relinquish control. We have one client who's going to be doing their own CX. The founders, these guys are amazing. I can't tell you who, but when they launch, I hope that everyone just supports them because they're great. But they're going to do their own CX, at least at the start. If the CEO's doing the CX is going to be stellar, we hope, because guess what? They're so passionate and they care so much, and they have all the authority. But once you get ready to hand that off, what would you tell leaders, founders, CX managers, whomever, who are getting ready to hand over this experience to this new person or group of people around QA? How would you tell them that they should manage it?
I think one of the things that I learned was you're going to have to be really nitpicky. So, be prepared to dig into, even if your email that you're looking at is 5 sentences long, be prepared to really dig into those 5 sentences.
Yeah. I like that too, because I think it's annoying to do that. It's not just annoying for the person receiving the perceived nitpicking, it's annoying for the person who has to nitpick. But I think that at the end of the day, that best judgment thing, or use your best judgment, it goes out of the window. There is a way to do things, and there's an expected outcome. And I need you to do this the way I asked you to do it so that it comes out this way. And you have to be specific about that. I once, when launched a quality program at a company, we had team leads. No one had experience, which is the reason why I started CXC, to be honest with you. Lovely group of people, but none of them had any experience in doing any facets of this work. So I'm trying to teach all of these things from the ground up and teach the thinking that comes along with it, which is very challenging. And so anyway, we did a calibration session. So a calibration session is when you all get together, you listen to the same, either phone call or review the same message or whatever, and then everybody rates it based on your criteria. So we did that, and we came back to discuss it. And it was interesting to me because we had team members who were like, oh, this call was scored at 100%. It was perfect. I was like, it was not a perfect call. He was monotone. He was sarcastic. Oh, that's just his personality.
It's interesting that you say that, because at one of the larger companies that I've worked in, that's what we would do as well. And I thought it was kind of unnecessary at first because I didn't know any better. But now I see the value in having multiple people dissect one call, one ticket. So I thought it was just one off that we did it. So knowing that that's a thing, that's kind of cool. I actually did learn properly,
Yeah.
Or doing case studies on, like you said, for training opportunities, having that, because like you're just saying, not everybody's going to see it the same way. So you're going to have, what I was going to add from Chloe's statement was the expectations, really being clear about what the expectations are, what you're looking for based upon what you are QAing is really key. But also in those kind of gray areas where you're like, well, tone, this person said it this way and this person said it monotone. Well, what is the team tone, right? And then having that kind of discussion to get the outcome so that you're able to refresh that QA process, right?
One of the things that I did, and this would be I probably will share this video to some of our channels, but I did the 5 steps to building a CX strategy. And the first one was to define your brand identity. And I think that's important because if you don't know who you are, right? You know, going to my Wakanda forever, who are you? Like, know who you are. If you don't do that, you know, then you know, everyone is going to be, is going to allow their own personality to shine through, which is not always a bad thing. But the reality is that there are guardrails. There are, you know, there are limitations to that. I mean, for example, political views, religious views. There are certain conversations that you just stay away from, right? And even as a company, you have to establish either who you are, that we do not discuss that, so that there's no gray area. So a brand that I think does really well with deciding or creating an experience that is consistent, mostly because I did have a bad experience. And I do know they take this very seriously, so I may be reaching out to get my free sandwich. But Chick-fil-A is very, very strict. They're strict. So when you go to Chick-fil-A and you're in the drive-thru, wherever you are, it's always, you know, very pleasant. How can I help you, et cetera, et cetera. And then instead of saying you're welcome, they say my pleasure, my pleasure. I think may or may not say that in real life. I doubt it very seriously, but it's a requirement. And you know it's a requirement because everybody says it there. So you can have those guidelines for your team where this is what, you know, we are supposed to say, or this is a phrase that you always use. There's also, for one company that I worked at a while back, there were two co-founders. Well, co-founders. Well, you get what I'm going with that. Two founders, and one was not as friendly. The other one was like a ray of sunshine. I mean, like literally, she looked like she glided through the office every day. She's still my friend. She knows who she is. Hi. I adore her. And she was what I would tell the team when I was heading up CX, like, imagine she's answering the phone. Imagine she's replying to the message. What would she say? If someone was angry or upset, how would she react? And that enabled them to actually become the brand, which means that even if I'm sarcastic in real life, she's not. So I got to kind of leave that at home, because when I come here, you know, it is, you know, take one, I'm on. Thank you for calling so-and-so, right? Because that's what the job is. What are some other pieces of advice? So I said brand identity is one. And I guess this is kind of redundant, but definitely do not allow for a person's personality to impact your brand. Because when that person decides to move on, the impression is there. And the impression stays on the brand.
You know, that's so true.
Yeah.
Because it's interesting in small businesses too. Like I'm talking tiny businesses like mom and pop shops that are trying to, they either have identified kind of what it is, but their customer service person they haven't aligned that, but the customers are used to dealing with that person. And then it switches to a new person. And then they're like, well, Sally used to do this, that, or the other. You know, who is this new person? Because they can tell. Yeah. And that's always interesting to see walking into a project like that, if it's something that just needs to be refreshed and defined better. But that's something I've noticed, that exactly what you're saying. The customer service person has defined the brand, not the business. And then as the customer service changes, the customers notice that. So there's like an identity crisis going on, essentially.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jordan.
I think something that like comes to mind with this as well is like documentation of this all is very important, both for the brand identity and for like process documentation in terms of change management and getting your team to actually think that it's fair. I can imagine a scenario where like if you start like grading an agent just out of nowhere, they cannot respond positively to that feedback. But if you document all your policies, what your brand voice is like, and have something in the QA process that they can refer to, I think it helps make that change management a lot easier and fair. Like when I was building out my first QA program, I was like, even though I know this answer internally, I see it's not documented anywhere. So it's not really fair for me to penalize somebody. And I know they won't think it's fair either. So like having this all written down, I think it's a lot of work documentation, but I think it's the fair way to go about it.
And there's also the piece of consistency. Quality to me and training are like best friends, first cousins. They hang out on the weekends and they do things together. It's just what it is, right? So one of the things that I do not love is the experience where you bring on a new person and you say, sit next to so-and-so, they're going to teach you how to do the work. And then not only do you learn how to do the work, but you learn all of their bad habits, right? And then now you have like this attitude that permeates throughout your team that started literally sometimes at the top. And now it's like, it's just ingrained in who you are, right? So to Jordan's point, if you have documentation of the expectations and you're using your quality program to enforce that in a lot of ways, you're going to end up in a space where everyone is giving a more consistent experience, right? Not one from, jaded Judy who hates working here and can't go anywhere else, but she just happens to know this place really well. And, she's tired of the management and she's tired of the customers. And now everyone has jaded Judy's attitude because that person who came in who was excited about joining your org, guess what? Now they're like, this is great. But, oh, it's so-and-so again. And, oh, I can't stand with it. You know what? I don't even reply to his messages on time. You can't have it.
And it messes up with your customers, going back to that point of jaded Judy is the person that's been doing the thing. And the customers are used to working with jaded Judy. Everybody's going to still want to talk to jaded Judy because of whatever's going on. The new person who's trying to learn, you know what I mean? It creates just a very difficult situation,
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Go ahead.
No, and I think it's partially like the reason that like new agents will glom on to that experienced agent is because that's what they have as a role model. And so that's usually because you don't have the training and documentation and all of that needed. And like I found like when I started as customer support rep for the first time, like getting QA feedback was always like such a welcome thing because I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing the right job. And like getting that feedback is one way to know from your manager that you're doing well or like where you can improve and like really can help build that like feedback culture. So everybody has these like standards they adhere to it and there's that consistency.
I love that because you know what? Getting feedback is not a bad thing. It's not bad. I mean, no one wants to continuously do the wrong things, right? So tell me if I'm doing something that's not right. I think it's not what you say. I think it's how you say it, right? So one of the things that even in my time, and I do not manage people anymore. You guys know that. I don't manage anyone who's part of CXC. We all work together. And I hope that you feel it because it's like, I just can't, no more. But something that I've learned is that it's not enough to tell someone what they're not doing right or that needs to change. It is better to tell them what it looks like, right? Because, if I gave each of you an assignment, we'd all get something back different because you're left to your devices on what success looks like. But if I come to you with an output and say, I need this filled in, then we're all on the same page a little bit better because I've shown you what it is that it looks like. When it comes to QA, obviously, or just ensuring that there's a consistent experience, we talked about documentation. We talked about showing success criteria to the folks that are doing the work. What are some of the other ways that you guys can think of where we can ensure like consistently that this is a good thing?
I think sort of going back to what you guys were saying before, it is leading by example. Mm-hmm. So I think that is a really critical technique. If you're expecting them to output quality, you yourself have to make sure that you are doing their QA consistently. You can't do it 1 week, take a week off. You have to be consistent as well.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that.
That's true. I like using the good and bad examples as kind of training opportunities on a regular basis, part of the weekly meetings even, especially if we're in a space where it's crazy. We've kind of gone in a space where we're navigating new things coming in and we're trying to figure out processes. Like, we're kind of in a space of chaos. I found that using those good and bad examples helps kind of get everybody on the same page, and then also helps with process, so doing that on a consistent basis I found to be pretty useful.
Yeah, another technique sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, depends on your culture, is like using your same rubric that you do for QA and like having agents do peer review or self-review, not to like grade and score and like use this for performance, but just so they can get in the habit of thinking of like what makes a good conversation, and like they put that hat on themselves, and they can also like learn from like looking at a peer's conversation. They like, you learn something all the time looking at what other, you're like, oh, that's crazy, I didn't know you could do that, or like handle a customer that way. Or I've had agents on my team like be excited and like come to me and say, this other person on your team like always handles customers, they have the right tone of voice, and like they steal words and phrases from them. Like that's super powerful.
I like that too. I love the self-review or peer review because it takes the pressure off. I know of a situation where someone, it's not a place I've worked or anything, but it's an outside conversation that I had. Someone was doing QA and then heard an opportunity and didn't take it to the boss, actually took it to the person and was like, hey, heads up, I was listening, I found this, just like, here's what you would be able to do in the future. No direct report, no nothing. And that didn't go over well. And I thought, what a missed opportunity to not be reprimanded, but to get guidance from someone who's listening in and just saying, hey, you could probably have a better result if you do this thing different. And I think that, like you mentioned, depends on the company culture. You have to foster that environment of like shared feedback, because I firmly believe that within our team, if any of us goes to each other and says, hey, I read this and I think that we could change this, we'd all be like, oh, thank you. It would not be a how dare you, critique me, because I think you have to remain open. Let's talk about some successes and failures. I'm going to start with a failure story. I love for people to learn from my mistakes because I make them often. So let's talk about one of my failures. I had a team of over 100. We were about 130. Our customer experience was not great. We grew so fast, and I'll take ownership for not having the right structure and the right leadership in place. Because when you grow at the rate that we were growing, you just need a body. And you don't like, please, can you just do this? Just hold this. Please hold this in place. This particular brick, just hold it here for like 3 weeks. I'll come back and talk to you. Don't worry about the other stuff. Just hold this. That was kind of the place that we were in. So anyway, we needed quality because the experience was inconsistent, and we were using Zendesk and we didn't know how to use Zendesk properly. And really, like, this company, I always talk about this. This is the reason why I started CXC, is because I went through the process of doing so many things wrong that I was like, if I put together a group of people who can do these things right, then maybe we can help the next company that is going to scale at that same rate to have the infrastructure that I needed as my hair turned gray. That's another story. But okay, so quality. So we start a quality program, and we were doing emails. We were doing emails and phones. I think those were the only two. And the time that it took for us to actually go through and quality assure a contact was significant. So you have, you read it one time, then you read it again to see what went wrong. Then you read it again to see what could have gone right or what you should do right. You're scoring it. You have to write up a summary. You then have to loop in the supervisor. And then that supervisor, hopefully, and sometimes you have to convince the supervisor of the opportunity. And then that supervisor has to have the conversation. That QA piece. And then also there's a piece of deciding what comes out of QA that needs to impact training. Because if you start to see trends and things, you have to do that. Now, we were doing it on spreadsheets. It's terrible. I admit. Okay. We were able to only quality assure 10% of our contacts. For some of our agents, that was like 1 to 2 contacts per week. So imagine you're getting graded every week on one email, one phone call, and it happens to be the one that you didn't do well on. But not the 90% that you did well on. The one that you didn't do well on is the one that we happen to get and we happen to measure. I personally believe that was my biggest failure in quality, is one, not feeling confident enough to say this is what we need to make this successful. 2, being a part of a company that talked about caring about the customer experience, but when you pull back all the layers, didn't really care about the customer experience. What would you guys say, if you're willing to share it, it's okay if not, I understand, but what would you say are your biggest, either you can do success or failure? I started with a failure. I'll do a success later. And on a high note.
So I have two examples from the same company. So this was before they had their QA system in place. And, I was still an agent, but I was seeing that there was a lot of missed opportunities. So I was like, maybe we should start doing something about it. One of the agents had merged a ticket with two different customers, and there was sensitive information. And the other person who received the email ended up doing fraud on the person who, so I was like, okay, that's one example of why we need QA. Another one was someone issued a refund, but instead of $10, they put $10,000 on accident. Luckily, the system flagged it and it didn't go through. But, so I see those as like, I would say maybe successes because we caught them.
Yeah.
But, it could have potentially been really, really bad.
Those are wonderful use cases. Everyone who's listening, who gets a chance to hear this, please listen to what Chloe said. Get you a QA program.
Yep.
Save yourself $10,000 in some fraud.
Yeah, no, for me, it was the QA not being aligned.
Okay.
And so it was a problem of the lack of understanding of what is expected. And that may have gone back to like documentation or just the fact that we were in a space where it was rapid. All the things were changing every week. It was crazy, right?
Yeah.
But that caused a lot of problems on what was successful versus not. Because you had kind of personal judgment that was going into instead of standardizing it. And that caused a lot of problems just with operations in general. And so it kept going on and on and on and on until like upper management really started to understand, like, no, we have a big gap here. This doesn't make any sense. And then people that were on the floor were like speaking up and saying it wasn't fair. There was arguments, a lot of infighting. And then finally, they caught it and fixed it. But it was a really stressful time, with trying to figure out what was right and what wasn't right. And it was very minute and it was very specific, but it creates a very stressful work environment. I'll just say that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think biggest like failure and something I learned a lot when I rolled out a QA program for the first time was around the change management piece and like getting folks acclimated to the feedback and like the scoring system and all of that. So like when you have a QA program, you can configure the rubric, you can weight things different ways, and like you can have it spit out a percentage score at the end or a letter grade or something. And so we had it spit out a percentage score based on things they got right and wrong. And I had some folks on my team that I think were like straight A students in school, and like they would get a 90% and it would like freak them out. They're like, this means I'm doing bad. But in our mind, a 90% was like, that's great, that's green, that's excellent. And so I like learned from that and like had to like have coaching conversations around like, hey, this is not about performance right now. This is about coaching and feedback. And so ever since then, like I've learned when rolling out the program, like really emphasize the like, it's all about the feedback nature of it. Like part of it is about performance, but it's really about like giving you that opportunity to improve, which works, I think, with a smaller team. When you get to like a team of like 100 folks, I think it becomes more of a numbers thing. But especially if you're rolling out QA and you're like a smaller company, like really like leaning into this is about like coaching, this is about improvement, like we're fostering this environment, and don't focus as much on the numbers at first, especially when you're still fine tuning things.
Yeah, and I think I 100% I'm on board with that, because at the end of the day, I think that having a quality assurance program actually tells people what it means to give good customer service, right? Because that's the first question is, well, how do I do well at my job? Well, that's what quality is for, to make sure that you do well at your job, right? And it's kind of like feeding into the CSAT conversation, where companies are not using CSAT because CSAT is intended to measure your experience with the person you spoke to or communicated with, but it's actually being used as a tool to measure how the person feels about the company, which is what NPS is. That'll be for another day. But that being said, the negative sides of having the CSAT listed actually ends up hurting the agent's ability to feel like they are actually contributing to or doing well with the customer, because they're upholding policy, right? Essentially So from a quality standpoint, they check all the boxes, but from a CSAT standpoint, they do not. It ends up coming down to what is the information that's being collected? Why is that information being collected? How is that information being utilized? So let's talk a little bit about QA metrics, which I think kind of ties into that. How have you guys measured quality? Like, what were some of the criteria? What was some of the criteria that you put on your rubrics?
I sort of go in order. So it'll be your intro. Did you greet the customer by their name? Did you acknowledge their issue? And then sort of go into the email body of it. Are you being resourceful? Are you, going into the correct internal documents to get your stuff? And then at the end, your signature. So I sort of break it down like that.
I like that. What about you, Jordan?
I've done it a couple different ways, and I think like at each company, it kind of depends on like what really you think makes a good, consistent branded experience. Or one thing I guess we haven't touched on is like the difference. Like, should you have a different rubric for calls, for chat, for email?
Oh yeah. And I think you should.
Right, because there's different expectations and like timeliness policies and like tracking. Like when you're on a phone, there's not much tracked, like written down. So yeah, like making sure you've got the rubrics fitting for those different channels, I think is important.
Yeah.
I usually did a lot of QA with phones. And so it's difficult with phones because everybody has their way, but you have to align it still with the brand and like the information. So everybody's got their way of saying something, and you want to keep, if the company's okay with that, it doesn't have to be like, because everybody would sound like a robot, right? So it was really keeping in those, did they say the company name? Did they use the customer name? Kind of going along what Chloe was saying, but as far as the phone conversation, and really like paying attention to tone and accuracy of information and troubleshooting correctly. So it was like a lot, and it all varied because it depended on what the customer was contacting about too. So definitely.
Yeah. I'm with you guys on all of that. There's one part that I do want to get into, and that one is around technology. And so literally on the episode just before this, so episode 8, if you haven't watched it or listened to it, we did touch on QA, and we talked a little bit about a couple of tools that were in the market that you guys have used. And Maestro came up and sounded like that one had some positive feedback from the team. So let's talk a little bit about like the spreadsheet world of QA and the systems and tools that can get you out of that space. Does Maestro have a minimum? I feel like they do.
Like minimum, I don't know. I think like without getting like their extra customer success and stuff, I think you could start with a pretty small team, but it is, I think, relatively expensive for a tool. I think
it's an undertaking, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not 100% sure, but when I was using it a couple years ago, it was like the average price was $35 per agent per month, which in the grand scheme of things isn't terrible.
Bad, actually. Yeah.
When I did the demo with them a couple weeks ago, I think it was the same pricing, $35 per person. Yeah.
Okay. Have you guys worked with any other quality tools?
I've had conversations with different vendors. I know there's like Playvox is one. There's one called Klaus. And there's Maestro. So there's a couple of different ones, and they offer like slightly different things. And some, I think Klaus also does like a lot of like machine learning, maybe.
Okay.
Then like can do some automated QA stuff. I think like at the end of the day, it's important to like have a human do some of the vetting as well. But if a computer and AI can like help point out some mistakes, that's pretty cool.
All right, I've got two that that I actually stand behind, trying to decide if I'm going to use names or not, but I'll tell you what they do. So there's one, and this one kind of talks about, Jordan, what you mentioned earlier, which is like giving the power to the agent to control the contact and to get the optimal, whatever that word is, to get the highest score. And so basically it's a star rating system. And it measures, I believe, 3 factors. At least it did. I haven't seen the latest, so that's my bad. But as you are communicating, let's say it's an email, based on what, the administrator, the person who configured the system, tells the system success looks like, it will give you stars according to how you're engaging. So did you use the customer's name? Is the sentiment proper for what the customer, messaged to you? Did you actually answer their question? Did you, here's my thing, one of my pet peeves, and I used to do in school when we would do like, you do you read a story, and then at the end of the story, they ask you like 5 questions. And when they like for this one, what technologies are available to help CX leaders manage and enhance customer service quality? And then you answer the question, Maestro or Playbox, instead of saying, well, tools that are available to help CX leaders, right? So this tool helps to guide that kind of conversation. And the pros about it are that the agent can control the quality. So they will obviously strive to get the higher score. The challenge is that agents can control the quality. And because of that, they will spend a lot of time on a message trying to reach that success criteria, delaying the customer's response so that they can get their 5 stars. I'm not going to say who. However, open to having conversations with anyone who's interested in a tool that is 100% based on AI and will get you, a decent quality program. It has the back-end metrics. You can get some analytics out of it. You'll learn a lot. The other one is a partner that we have worked with before the Workforce Pro /CX even started, so since 2015. And this one I can only get people in if they are going to scale. I cannot get anybody in this program if they are going to stay small. So that's probably why, like for some of our clients who I know are just going to be small and remain, I don't even bring it up. But this one is AI enabled, but people verified. That company where I was only doing 10% of the QA team there, we rolled it out there and we're able to do 100% of the contacts. So to do some math, I don't know what their pricing is today, but we had 4 people on the QA team. This was 2015-ish. I want to say they all made around $50K. So $200,000 a year to get 10% of your contacts versus, I don't know what we paid there monthly, but it wasn't the equivalent of a 50K salary, not even one 50K salary. So let's say we saved 75%. The tool also supports text analytics. So we had the ability to specifically seek out contacts that included said word, said phrase. If you have a situation or scenario where you're saying, on every call, you need to say my pleasure, then you can actually search for any call where my pleasure is not said and then dig into it. And they do weekly calibrations. So that one I would say is one that I would go with if the team is going to scale. We have put, a previous client on that one. They have been on that program for 5 years now, and it's continuing to grow. So that's, if I were to talk about tech in that space, I really like it. Now, can you get away with a spreadsheet? Yes. Do I recommend that you stay on a spreadsheet? No. Is it worth roughly $35 per agent to move from that spreadsheet to a Maestro? Yes. But I will say this, do not roll out a quality program that you cannot maintain. Sachin brought that up. I don't know if it was this episode or the last one, but if you can't maintain it, just don't do it. Because it really is, it's not a passive thing, right? So a lot of times, like, the thought is that the supervisor can do the quality. And depending on your structure, I mean, I'm going to give you a big fat maybe on that, because the role of being in the day-to-day is so highly unpredictable. Like 70% of the day is just going to be what comes up that day. 30% of the things that you think you need to do to get through to tomorrow, right? So supervisors should really be in the moment and having conversations when they can have conversations, but we'll talk about that another time too. We got to get into roles and all that stuff and what those roles are doing. We did the one on manager, but the reality is that there are a lot of other roles that live in CX that just need to be exposed as far as like what the expectations are and what's real and what can and cannot be done. Yeah, so those are the tools that I like. If you guys have any opinions on that? I know I haven't talked to you guys about that before, but like, what do you guys think?
No, I agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. It's very difficult to have things that are in place with the expectation that they're going to be maintained, especially with spreadsheets, because spreadsheets need to be maintained. Going back to Chloe's point, you can't do it 1 week, then it got busy, then you forgot for 3 weeks, then you got back to it, then you forgot what the expectations were. It's not a consistent practice, right? And it's difficult because you're depending on a human being to maintain something. So either it has to be very much so documented and very much so regimented in the process, in the workflow that you have as far as the QA process, or as to Ty's point, don't do it at all. Maybe it's just something that you want to touch on monthly. You can have something that's a general QA. I mean, it doesn't have to be super duper detailed or specific, especially if you're a small company, but you do need to have something, if that's a sustainable situation that you can maintain. So, just like I said with documentation, as long as you have something to refer back to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One thing I'll add though to that is no system or tool is the magic answer. The perfect ingredient is you and your expectations and being clear about those expectations. So the reason why I'm saying that is you can roll out any of the products that we just talked about, but if you don't know what success looks like, neither does that system. And the people who are there, whether you work with someone like us or you work with that company directly, when you get ready to roll it out, they're going to ask you, what is your success criteria? What does it mean to deliver a good customer experience for your company? So every system can show you how to do it. The question is, what do you need to do? That part is not easy. That part takes time. That part takes thought. And you have to spend most of your time planning, far less of your time executing. Because once you have the plan in place and you know what success looks like, execution is really easy. So, or easier, let's say that. I do hope that we have been able to communicate the importance of a quality program, and also expose the good, as she would say, the good, the bad. I'm always taking your sayings because they're so good. The good, the bad, the ugly around quality assurance. It is not a straightforward thing. It is not a one size fits all. You're not going to open a box to any system and deploy it and now you have great quality. That is not how this works. Every tool or system that you deploy, you've got to tell it what to do, right? And that is why AI cannot take over every job. I'm just saying. Does anybody have anything that they want to add?
Yeah, I would just say although it is hard, it's like a challenge, but so important. I think especially as your team, if you're getting beyond 5 agents, that's when you start to lose the thread and you're going to have people talking different ways to customers and you need that consistent voice at that stage. So it's hard, it's challenging, but so worth it to when you get all the gears moving in it and it works well.
I love that. That's a great rule of thumb. So 5+.
5+. I agree with that. And making sure whatever QA you are doing it consistently. Mm-hmm. And you are setting some level of expectation of what it means in the QA. Just don't leave it to somebody to say, do QA on something, and then that person has no guidance, and making sure that you got something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it can absolutely be a full-time job. So if you need to create a role for that, it's very worth it.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes your manager is not going to be able to keep that consistency. So if you need to make an extra role for it, do it.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is that even if you go with a BPO, business process optimizer, you take that piece of your business, you give it to someone else, it doesn't mean that you don't have to worry about it internally. It can cut down the role that Chloe's talking about from not full-time to part-time. But if you decide to keep it in-house, it is minimum full-time. And it really depends on the number of people that you're trying to support and how frequently you're going to be able to do this. But do not make the mistake that I made and do 10% for 130 people who want to put your head on a stake, Ned Stark style, because you got the one contact that was terrible instead of, the other 90% that was really good. All right. Another one in the bag. I appreciate you guys. I hope you have the best weekend and that everybody eats something that is fattening and tastes really good, and that you guys binge out on some television show or you go out and get sun, whatever it is that you want to do, that you get that done this weekend. And I will catch you on the next one.
I have validation now to do all those things.
You are great for it.
So thank you for that.
For you. All right, y'all. Thank you so much. Bye.